presentation for today. So whoever's ringing the glasses, thank you. Folks, if you could please take your seats. Lovely humans, please have a seat. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. We are so excited to have Dr. Stephen Palumbi, the former director of Hopkins Marine Station, and Dr. Fionenza Micheli, current co-director of Hopkins, with us today. Before we get started, I would like to welcome our members and a number of guests who we have here today. So thank you for being here. I would also like to welcome our elected and appointed dignitaries in the room. And so if we can please hold applause to the end. We have Monterey Peninsula Water District Director George Riley, Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Director Amy Anderson, Marina Coast Water District Board President Gail Morton. I think we have Seaside, I think, did I see him? Seaside Council Member David Pacheco. I spoke with you earlier, okay. And then California Coastal Commissioner Annie Nodder. So thank you, everyone. Did I miss anybody? Okay. All right, well, welcome for being here. Thank you.
I'm going to be running for something.
Well, that's wonderful. We're going to get to running later on a little bit. So congratulations, and that's where it starts. Announce yourself. So just quickly tell me your name. And what are you running for?
Well, I worked in community colleges for 25 years.
So,
I'm running for MPC Trustee Area 4.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. And we have other folks who are running here today, I believe. Go ahead.
Jean Rash, City Council, Monterey, District 3.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Excellent. Anybody else running? We're trying to get as many DWMC folks running as we can. Okay. Before we really get into this, I also just want to take a moment to give a shout out to someone, to Wes White, who is in the back. And Wes has consistently shown up as a volunteer to film many of our DWMC events. And so we're really grateful for his service and his support, as it allows us to further live our commitment to inclusivity and accessibility, because he's making our events available on our website and also on his YouTube channel, so that folks who can't join us in person can remain educated and engaged in our community. So thank you, Wes. We have some of his cards on the back table, so if you are hosting a community event that you would like video, please reach out to him, or maybe he does personal things as well. I can't speak on that part, but so thank you. All right. There are a few announcements that I would like to make. We sort of touched on it already by our candidates, or soon-to-be candidates. If you're thinking about running, now is the time. We do support candidates, and the filing applications for all elected offices for open city council and special district seats begins July 15th and ends on August 9th. So please let us know, and then you can find more about this under the candidates section on the Monterey County Elections website. You can also go to the DWMC website for more information about running. So as we're preparing for the upcoming general election, there are many volunteer opportunities which you can do in the comfort of your own home. And also on our website, we have a section called Volunteer and Get Out the Vote, which has opportunities that you can do from your home. So please check them out. You can also look under our partners section, under the Planned Parenthood page, which has opportunities for getting involved in Nevada and Arizona as we get closer to the elections. If you have any questions, of course, on any of that, feel free to reach out to me or any of our board members. And board members, can you please raise your hand so people can know who you are? Okay. Federica in the back, Julie Guest, Josie Wilson, who wants Margie K, of course. And
Of course. Where are you, of course?
okay, so now for we do have a couple of other very exciting upcoming events. Next month, on July 12th, we are co-sponsoring the Monterey County Race Relations Summit, and we hope you can join some of our board members for a day of important discussions and networking opportunities focusing on improving race relations throughout our community. It's an event being put on by the Black Leaders and Allies Collaborative, or BLAC, and you can learn more about that on our website. Now, we actually have an even more exciting, no offense to that, it's a fabulous and important event, but we do have on July 28th at Burnett and Black Horse in Seaside, we will be holding our annual Sustainability Gala, where we'll be honoring Dr. Dana Kent with our 2024 Visionary Leader Award, and Chelsea's Hayden Feng Tu with our 2024 Emerging Leader Award. You may also know her as Chelsea Tu, she's just incorporated her full name. In addition to presenting our awards, we will be sharing just a delicious meal, and Senator John Laird will be returning as our auctioneer for what will be an excellent opportunity to support our local candidates while bidding on local delicacies, gifts, and experiences. So we do hope we'll see you at our gala. Sponsorship and tickets are available on our website. Now, before we begin our program, I'd like to address the elephant, or perhaps the whale, in the room. And that the elephant or whale is, why are we, a predominantly women's organization, having a white male speaker as one of our 2 key Right, because we like him. So this was a very conscious decision on our part. Now, aside from the obvious that we're not an exclusive organization, we want to also support the outstanding men who support women in leadership. Indeed, it's their voice that helped open the door for intelligent, creative, and powerful women to rise. In fact, we'll see that in today's presentation. You'll literally see this in practice. And so with that, we hopefully address the elephant or whale in the room. Thank you, Steve, for actually owning it for us. Thank you. A few days ago, on Monday night around 10 p.m., after completing a 12-hour journey from the East Coast, I deplaned in Monterey Airport. While walking down the ramp from the plane to the tarmac, the air was delicious. Cool, with a bit of mist, and a gentle, just right breeze. The briny smell from the ocean embraced every moisture molecule that touched my skin and became part of my inhalation, part of my breath, awakening that primordial connection to salt water and the oceans which connect us all to one another. It was a moment of profound perfection where you, or I, am incredibly grateful for living on this beautiful peninsula that we share. It was a moment that will stay embedded in my memory. The sensual richness of life and breath was in stark contrast to the thoughts running through my mind. I was thinking about the upcoming election and my concerns not just about Trump, but about Biden as well. But then I found myself thinking about the Biden administration and about its accomplishments over the past term. I was thinking about some recent research I had read on biology and neurons, and how we are literally, as human beings, hardwired to need one another, and that any time we've ever accomplished anything, it is never because of just one person, it is because of an entire team. It is because of all of us. And in politics and policy, it's because we work together as a team, from the federal to the state, county, and local levels, influencing one another in a bi-directional manner that is from top down and bottom up. The Democratic team that makes up the Biden administration has moved us forward with regards to climate change and the ocean. The ocean, including the open ocean, coasts, estuaries, the U.S. Arctic, the Great Lakes, and U.S. territories, spans 70% of the globe, from shallow bays to the depths and areas beyond any nation's jurisdiction. The ocean area of the U.S. exclusive economic zone is 1.5 times the area of the continental U.S. With this in mind, in 2023, the Biden administration accomplished the first ever U.S. Ocean Climate Action Plan, or OCAP, which focuses on some of the most important ocean ecosystems and marine activities. OCAP has 3 goals that mobilize the federal government and civil society to take effective and innovation ocean climate action. They are 1, to create a carbon neutral future without emissions that cause climate change and harm human health. 2, accelerate solutions that tap the power of natural coastal and ocean systems to absorb and store greenhouse gases, reduce the climate threat, and protect communities and ecosystems against unavoidable changes. And 3, to enhance community resilience to ocean change by developing ocean-based solutions that help communities adapt and thrive in our changing climate. The actions described in the OCAP also provide other benefits, such as good-paying jobs, workforce innovation, resilient food production, ecosystem health, and scientific knowledge. To reach these ambitious goals, the OCAP maps out 8 priority actions, including conserving and restoring coastal and marine habitats that naturally store carbon or blue carbon, and expanding protected areas in the ocean, or the marine protected areas, to enhance resilience of ocean ecosystems that provide food, jobs, recreational opportunities, cultural identity, and more. Guiding these actions is a commitment to be responsible stewards of a healthy and sustainable ocean, advance environmental justice, engage with communities, tribal nations, and indigenous peoples, act based on evidence, science, and indigenous knowledge, and integrate and coordinate actions across federal government. Undoubtedly, this plan is reflected here at the local level, not only in our history, but more importantly, in the present moment and in our future. And it is being led by dedicated people with vision and care. We are fortunate to have 2 of these people as our guest speakers today. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Steve Palumbi and Fionenza Micheli. Dr. Stephen Palumbi is a Jane and Marshall Steele Jr. Professor of Marine Sciences, Professor of Oceans and of Biology. He has lectured extensively on human-induced evolutionary change and has used genetic detective work to identify whales, seahorses, rockfish, and sharks for sale in retail markets, and is developing genomic methods to help find ocean species resistant to climate change. He works at the Hopkins Marine Station, focusing on how kelp, sea urchins, abalone, and mussels respond to short-term environmental change and to environmental shifts over small spatial scales. As well, he has authored many books, including The Death and Life of Monterey Bay, a story of revival, written with Carolyn Soto. Welcome, Steve. And thank you again for being here. Fionenza Micheli is chair of the Ocean Department, co-director of Stanford's Center for Ocean Solutions, and a marine ecologist at the Hopkins Marine Station at Stanford University, where she is the David and Lucille Packard Professor of Marine Science. Dr. Micheli's research focuses on the processes shaping marine communities and coastal social ecological systems, and incorporating this understanding in marine management and conservation. She investigates climatic impacts on marine ecosystems, particularly the impacts of hypoxia and ocean acidification on marine species, communities and fisheries, marine predators ecology and trophic cascades, the dynamics and sustainability of small-scale fisheries, and the design and function of marine protected areas. In addition, her current research takes her to Mexico, Italy, Palau, and of course, here in California. Welcome, Flo.
I just want to say thank you for everyone for coming. There's lots of great friends in the room. And especially thanks for putting this together with Theo, who's really fabulous scientist and a great person to round this all out. I do want to say, given that sort of elephant in the room introduction, that I didn't really start off actually looking for a topic where 6 women were playing such an important role in making our community the way it is. It just turned out that way. And all of these people that I encountered doing such amazing things and pushing ahead so resolutely with passion and stubbornness and being right, they were all these amazing women who were real trailblazers in their own profession, but also really intersected with our lives. And so that's how that all came about. And you'll see just how amazing they have been. And the other thing I wanted to just begin with was that when we came here, Theo and I got here about the same year, 2001, 2002. We were all still, even at that time, going around the world talking about the problems that the oceans has and everywhere in the world. And we get to Monterey, and it's gorgeous, and it's lovely, and it's it's vibrant. And then the question in my mind immediately was it always that way? And the answer was no, it wasn't always that way. That it actually had some troubles, and difference is it got better. So this is about getting better, and the people that allow that to happen over time, and then how that's still happening now. We can jump back a little ways in time to 1969 in Santa Barbara, where that oil spill happened. Some of you might have been living here at that time. That was the biggest oil spill in the coastal U.S. at the time, and it really affected the coasts along the way. The reaction in Santa Barbara was palpable, it was immediate, and it led to the question, how can we make sure that this does not happen again? And one of the people that was really involved in that was Julia Packard, her sister Nancy Burnett. And Julia said, when I was talking to her about this particular event, what went through her mind was, what if we lost the ocean? What if we lost the life of the ocean to these events? And then that led to subsequent actions on their part. We'll talk about that a little bit more, to bring back the Monterey Bay Aquarium. But let's take a step back to when it wasn't so great in Monterey, and the kinds of things that had been going on. So since Western nations got here in the late 1700s, the business model in the ocean has been a particular one: find something of value, get it, sell it, repeat. Until that's gone, find the next thing. Get it, sell it, repeat. And that depletes the ocean, and we did that with sea otters. That was the first thing we depleted. And there was whales, there were abalone, there were even seabirds. There were 600,000 seabird eggs were taken off the Faroe Islands to feed the miners in the Sierra Nevada. And in each of those cases, there was a huge burst of activity, lots of things taken, and then a collapse. The most famous of those, of course, is the sardine fishery that defines Cannery Row. And this is just a plot, I think this is the only data I'm showing, of the increase in the number of sardines that were taken in Monterey over the years from about 1917 to, in this case, is about the late 1930s. That increase was the subject of actually an intense interest by the California Fisheries and Wildlife Department, who really wanted to get an idea how that was going to work. And they hired one of the very first women fishery scientists to study that. However, and what she found in that sort of set of studies, this was Clark, was that increase in sardines was not sustainable. Now, actually, no one really paid that much attention to what she was saying because they said, look, it keeps going up and up and up every year. And what's wrong with that? Everything is good. She was one of the first people in the world to say, you've got to look at how many boats there are in the water. If the sardines are increasing, but the boats are increasing, that's because you're getting more sardines because there's more boats. And you have to look at something she called the catch per unit effort. That is, how many boats does it take to catch how many sardines? And unless you put both of them together, you will not get the right picture, you will not get the right answer. And that was scoffed at for a long time, but then it turned out that she was completely and utterly right, and that is now the main way that we study fisheries. The catch per unit effort is a scale of how sustainable something is. And the catch, but the same catch, same effort is stable, we're good, but if the catch goes up because the effort goes up, you're in an unsustainable situation. She wrote in 1937, the future of the California sardine fishery remains in doubt and that demand exceeds supply. And this is the graph she used to show that, and that's where the fighting happened. She basically got a lot of pushback from a lot of people about that. She essentially then was proven right. It was absolutely right. She led that department for 17 years in Southern California and is regarded as one of the luminaries in the the birth of fisheries as a science in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, along the way. Along that way, the bay itself was experiencing not only the fisheries problems, but other problems of an industry. Rolf Polin was professor at Hopkins and wrote that the fumes from the scum floating on the waters of the bay were so bad they turned lead-based paint black. And what's shown here is an aerial shot of Cannery Row. The problem was twofold, that the ovens that made fish meal from sardines really made the entire peninsula smell incredibly bad. Fish, air pollution was bad. But also, a sardine goes in a can, but not its guts, not its tail, not its head. Where do they go? They built the canneries with 1-inch gaps between the floorboards so that all that stuff would fall into the water. And what you see, that scum floating in the water there, that is millions of pounds of sardine scum that just would fall into the bay. So the bay became polluted, the air became polluted, and that was really changing the way that people could live here. That became a really important part of the legacy of Julia Platt, shown here in 3 images. On the left is her as a graduate student. Woods Hole, she was a graduate student in 1893 in the oceanography program at Woods Hole Marine Biology Lab. She couldn't get a PhD in zoology as a woman in the late 1800s and went to Germany to get her PhD. She came here, became a leader in the civic life here. The middle thing is her most famous event. I will tell you about that in a little bit. And then on the right is a picture of her when she was mayor of Pacific Grove. Julia fought for access to the beach. This is her basically taking down a fence. This was a fence in front of the Lover's Point where that restaurant is now. That was a private home. The owners put a fence across the beach so people couldn't get to the beach in front of their house. That was illegal. Everyone agreed. Julia asked the police and the mayor and the city council of Pacific Grove to intervene, and they wouldn't do that. And so Julia went herself and basically broke the lock. The owners put it back. She broke the lock again. The owners put it back. And then she just came with a crowbar and a fence and a photographer and took the fence down, laid it across the beach. Yeah, I love the idea she brought it up. And she also invented tweeting. And this is about the 1920s, tweeting involved making signs, putting them on. And this was a sign that she put up on that fence that says, "Opened by Julia Platt, this entrance to the beach must be left open at all hours when the public might reasonably wish to pass through. I act in the matter, because the council and police department of Pacific Grove are men and possibly somewhat timid." I know. So, then Julia really tried fighting back against the pollution that the canneries had, and the city council said, "If you want to do stuff like that, Julia, that's the mayor's job. You got to be mayor." So she ran for mayor, and she won her mayor's job. There's just some little cute things about there. And she convinced the California state government to do something it had never done before and never done since. They gave the city the power to regulate the ocean in front of the Pacific Grove. And she created the Pacific Grove Marine Gardens, and in front of the Hopkins Marine Station, the Pacific Hopkins Marine Life Refuge. She protected the life of the ocean in front of all of Pacific Grove because she couldn't fight the economic might of the countries, but she could protect the shoreline so that that might was there, that ocean life was there when things got better. And this was an amazing thing, I think, taking the issue saying, I can't do this, but I can do this, and this is going to work. And it did work, but it took a while. It took a while because it took otters a little while to come back into the picture. Otters were really pretty much absent from Pacific Grove and Monterey from about 1780 to 1963. 1963, otters came back into Monterey Bay, and they eat abalone, they love abalone. Where did they go? Where were the abalone? The abalone were at the Hopkins Marine Life Refuge that she had set up 30 years before. And so the otters came into Monterey Bay, went to the refuge, they ate the abalone, but then they also ate a lot of the sea urchins, and the kelp forest grew back. They basically came back to life as a consequence of the otters coming in and having a place to live. So it took 30 years for that to work, but it did work incredibly well. And as a consequence, this whole forest we have underwater right now in Monterey and around the peninsula, up and down the whole coast actually. Theo is one of the main scientists studying the health of the kelp forest up and down the west coast. That's because the otters came back and started allowing it to grow. Well, kelp are algae, and studying algae was actually done incredibly well at the Hopkins Marine Station by Isabella Abbott, shown here. Izzy was born in Honolulu. She got her PhD at Berkeley. She was the first native Hawaiian to get a PhD. And she came to the Hopkins Marine Station in 1960 as a lecturer. And she worked on the algae in the kelp forest, not just the kelp, but all the understory algae that were there. She named and described and characterized more species of algae along this coast than anybody else ever has. But she was a lecturer. She was a lecturer from 1960 until 1973. And along the way, she kept publishing papers and being influential and writing books. And she was the world leader of the West Coast kelp forest and algae. And then finally in 1973, the faculty at the biology department at Stanford, where Hopkins was part of, suddenly woke up and realized this amazing woman had been doing this incredible work. She was internationally recognized as a algalogist, and they promoted her from lecturer to full professor in a day. That has never happened before. It was certainly later than it should have been. But they recognized that this was an incredible scientist doing an incredible job and bringing the algal forest, the kelp forest, to life. Izzy actually retired in 1983, went back to Hawaii. The Hawaii State Legislature voted her a Hawaii living treasure. And she dedicated her life to understanding not only algae and seaweed, but also how people use them, something she called ethnobotany. So the ethnobotany of algae on this coast and in Hawaii were her life's goals for her last couple of decades or so. Well, we still have a transition to kind of cover. That is the transition from the canneries to the kelp forest. And that is embodied here with the derelict Hilton Cannery, which is now the aquarium. And this is Julia Packard, the early model of the aquarium. This is probably 1978 or so, with the Hopkins Cannery in the background. And she and her sister Nancy Burnett, and Steve Webster, Chuck Baxter, who you may know, be familiar with, put together a plan to basically bring the aquarium to Cannery Row, because they were incredibly excited about the fact that the ecosystem was coming back to life. The otters were here, the kelp forest came back, John Pierce had started the first kelp forest ecology class at UC Santa Cruz, and all of this was an example of things coming back to life. That was a really rare and wonderful example of that, and both Julia and her sister Nancy really wanted that to be brought to people. So they rebuilt the whole area as an aquarium, opened in 1984, as you can probably imagine, and it's with the goal of inspiring conservation of the oceans. But also changed the business model. And the business model was take, sell, deplete, repeat. This business model was that the economy and the health of the ecosystem, the health of the ocean, were tightly entwined. They couldn't have a good economy without a good environment and a good natural environment. And that is a very different model because it is a much more sustainable model than it does what Julia Platt wanted, that is allow us all to have a great place to live by having the ocean be a great place. to live. And this is kind of where we are now in a situation where there's a constant back and forth among different uses of the ocean. There's a bunch of sardine boats sitting there, but there's a bunch of recreational boats. There's diving, there's tourism, there's agriculture. There's a lot going on in our area, and they're all in conversation in a little conflict with one another about how things go. But unlike previous times, no single industry, like the whaling industry or the sardine industry, is ever going to be allowed to ruin Monterey Bay again. And that's an amazing change. And it's still going on. And so I have the pleasure of working with another group slightly south of here. Some of you may have heard of a proposal for a new national marine sanctuary. It's called the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. It's in pink there. It was meant to be just south of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary at Cambria and go down almost all the way to Santa Barbara. And that was basically being promoted and pushed ahead by the Northern Chumash Tribal Council, a group of people who have lived along this coast for 7,000 to 10,000 years. It was originally proposed by Fred here, Tomlinson, and then his daughter Violet Sage Walker has taken on that role. She has been pushing that ahead over the last couple of years. It's now at the stage where it's up to the National Geographic and Atmospheric Association to make a final determination of that. But every step of the way, Violet has been incredibly good at bringing the community together and saying, this is what we need, and making it a way for this group of people who've lived here a long time to be part of the protection of it, but then part of the management and research of it. So we play a role in doing biodiversity monitoring with the DNA floating around in the ocean, called environmental DNA. We're using that to monitor the biodiversity and the abundance of the critters that account for us. Basically as a way for the Chumash group to give that research project to the sanctuary system, teach them how to do it, and then let that spread. And the idea there is, instead of the sanctuary system telling the local group what they're going to do in research and how it's going to work, they want to reverse the flow and make it so that they can show how that research can be done and then why it's an important part for all that in the future. This is just sort of part of that coast along the way, and it's an amazing shoreline with a long history. And so one of the interesting things we're doing is essentially learning how to talk about these places with their original Chumash name and using them in our maps rather than things like, for example, Vandenberg or Point Conception, which were on the Humcock archipelago there along the way. We could go into what the DNA is like and all that, but it's really not that important. The main thing, though, is that by looking at this part of the coast, essentially, and using the DNA of these organisms as the signature for where they are and how many there are, we can pull up lots of amazing different kinds of critters that are along the way. And that fits in really nicely with the philosophy of the Chumash that life is sacred, no matter how big or no matter how small. Just knowing it's there is a really important part of being in a place. That's one of the amazing things about this particular work. Big things, small things, fish along the way. So here we are in this election year, as Lisa was saying, and we're all probably a little nervous about 6 p.m. tonight. But there are people that have made things get better. There are people that have really helped the community. There are people that whose passion about things and whose stubbornness and whose really vision has paid off. Julia's idea of marine protected areas paid off 30 years after her death. And then Violet's idea of that we can build a sanctuary and we can get a new one done based on her father's initial idea was also an incredible kind of thing. So things can happen, things can get done, and individual people can do them. And that's one of the things I take from this sort of this history, the inspiration that individuals can make a difference. It's not easy, but the passion and the drive to do that is within many of us. And then we can see it happen, we can see it happening around us even now. And when we see that, we should just smile and support that and say, yeah, go. And that's what I hope we can all do. So, thank you.
Come on up.
Yes, so thank you so much for the invitation. As Lisa introduced, I'm also at Hopkins Marine Station. I'm a marine ecologist by training. My passion, since as long as I can remember, is the ocean, and I want to start there on the vital importance of the oceans for our planet and for all of us. As now Lisa introduced, the ocean plays a key role in carbon capture and sequestration, in climate regulation, supports half of the production of our planet, so all the important food webs in the ocean and in the coasts, major source of food, nutrition, livelihood, supports economies for communities all over the world, and supports a huge amount of the diversity on our planet, of which we still know a minute fraction. In fact, I would argue that the ocean is the true last frontier. Proportionally, we have explored less of the ocean than the visible space. It's the largest ecosystem on Earth, 70% of our planet. Our ocean here, the Pacific Ocean, is 1/3 of our planet. And we know very, very little about oceans. And then at the same time, the ocean and our planet are changing very rapidly. Over the past year.
You have to hold it much closer to your mouth.
Lisa.
I'm pointing.
Thank you. And if I forget, just give me a sign. Sorry about that. So over the past year, the seawater temperatures have broken records every single day. So the intensity, the pace of warming is escalating. We are facing the 4th global coral bleaching event, the 2nd one just in the last decade. And here in our beautiful backyard in California, the healthy kelp forest ecosystems that we have here have also been impacted significantly. The recent marine heat waves of 2014-16 have removed what we estimated, based on a combination of satellite data and monitoring data from the water, from surveys in the water, as much as half of our kelp forests in California currently, just over a period of 1 year. So these systems here is still a healthy and diverse and productive system like Steve presented, but is facing major threat, and in fact it has already undergone major change just in the last few years. So this interconnected crisis, climate, biodiversity loss, and then the impact on food and livelihoods, the impacts on people, require everyone. It's really all hands on deck. Facing this crisis for oceans and for people is going to require everyone. But is everyone engaged? Is it really all hands on deck? And as you could probably guess, the answer is no, not yet. Access and engagement of women at national and global scales, it's still lagging. And this has been called by scholars in the field the stalled revolution, because the jump up in many indicators of gender parity, from salaries to representations in leadership positions, for example, in the US has jumped up in the 70s, following really important legislations that were passed then, but it has increased at a very slow pace ever since. So I just want to talk for a few minutes about where we are and where are the trends, and then talk about some of the mechanisms that are and also hold great promise to change this underrepresentation of women in the science, in environmental conservation, and importantly, in decision-making and policy. So these are data from a recent survey from the Center of Ocean Leadership that collected data on women representation and also other dimensions of diversity. I will focus on gender here, from 55 institutions in the US over a period of 15 years, from 2007 to 2021. And what this data, as well as many other similar studies, show is that in these past decades, we have reached equal representation, and in fact, a slightly greater representation of women at the level, for example, of graduate studies. In fact, now we are about 55% of women accepted in graduate program in this institution, retained, and also graduating with PhD in marine sciences. But then this fraction, this representation decreases as we move up in the academic ladder to an average 20% of women that are tenure faculty. This is representative of other contexts and other studies. For example, this is a study that I conducted with some colleagues from Europe. We looked at data from different kinds of European Union institutions, and these are indicators, probably too small for you to read, but these are indicators of women hires, different metrics of scientific productivity, publication, grants, and also representation of women in leadership positions, for example, institute directors, department chairs. And what this shows again is that at the beginning, there's equal representation, but then that is lost. Women are now moving up.
If people can't see, the red line is the men.
Absolutely. So this is the men, and this is women. And essentially, this is what we call the funnel, where no matter what indicator we consider, there is this funnel where women have equal representation, there's gender parity at the entry level, but then that decreases. And so in this study, we asked the community, now through a survey that we circulated, what are people's thoughts about the consequences of these patterns, and also what they think might be effective measure to accelerate women representation in the sciences, and in the marine sciences and conservation. So we got a little over 700 responses from 42 countries, and the overwhelming majority of respondents is aware of biases against women and underrepresentation of women in marine science and conservation, and views this as the main obstacle towards progress in science and conservation in the ocean, which was really significant and very interesting, more than many other aspects like funding levels, etc. And then when presented with different options that are based on policies or interventions that institutions and governments are putting in place to address gender inequalities in the sciences, the overwhelming majority ranked two types of mechanism first. One is more transparency in hires and promotions, gender-blind recruitment and promotions. And the second one is support for families. For example, through parental leaves, support for childcare, stopping the academic clock during maternity leaves. Measures that have received a lot of attention, especially in the European Union, but elsewhere as well, were ranked lowest. For example, gender-specific fellowships, support that is given only to women, and cluster hire in academia of only women. So transparency and support for families are really the mechanism that are ranking first. And then moving beyond the sciences and conservation. Can you hear me okay now? Yeah. This is a report that the World Economic Forum puts out yearly. The gender gap report for this year just came out this past month. And it's an assessment of the trends and status of gender parity around the world. based on 4 main dimensions, which are economic participation, education, health, and political empowerment. So based on these dimensions and these indicators, the conclusion is pretty depressing. We are still, on average, across this indicator, 130 years away from gender parity. That is equivalent to 5 generations. So these trends are a reminder of the importance of investment in leaders, in leadership, especially in policy, in decision making, and in a shift for the public and private sectors in having gender equality, gender parity as a goal and as a target for significant investment. Without significant investment, we will continue to chug along on this very slow trend, and it will take a very long time to achieve the changes that we all know are needed. So I want to now shift from this general view to what is happening in the ground. I think Steve presented a real inspiring set of individual stories that show what can happen at a local scale through grassroots, community-led movements. And I want to talk about a couple of examples of the form that this is taking place outside of Monterey Bay as well. What does it look like? The first one illustrates the power of citizen science and action. And this is an example of women led by this amazing leader, which is Anne Singio, who's the lead of an NGO in Palau, a Build Society. Women in Palau, as in many other island nations across the Pacific and across the world, often engage in fisheries, in collection, in this case sea cucumber, clams, and other invertebrates. Palau opened their fishery that are typically reserved to women for this species to export in 2011. And so, because of the high value of this product that could be exported to Asian market, men entered the fisheries. And because men have boats and have infrastructure that allow for more efficient catch, within a few years, those populations were overexploited. Then this policy was reversed, and there was again a ban on export. But by then, the health of the population was compromised. And so women organized to initiate monitoring of these populations and also to start restoration projects. They were able to launch aquaculture facilities to grow the sea cucumber, sell them, consume them, but also reseed them in the wild. And the importance of this local initiative was very clearly demonstrated during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is from a study that combined surveys on the occurrence of food insecurity, or conversely food security, around 7 Pacific Island nations, also led by Anne Singio and other collaborators, including a student at Stanford, Caroline Ferguson. And the results show that through boosting local production, as the example that I just mentioned, and also initiative for food sharing led by women, food insecurity was extremely rare in this context. And so those local activities played a major role in supporting food and nutritional security around the region at the time where transport ceased, especially during the first year of the pandemic, and so there were no food imports in this region and tremendous risks of food insecurity. A second example that I want to talk about comes from Baja California in Mexico, where I've been collaborating on projects on coastal resilience for over 20 years. And this system, just like California, as I mentioned, has this beautiful, productive, diverse kelp forests, just like ours, that were also impacted by the marine heat waves and other recent events, which had major consequences on the local ecosystems. As you know, you're familiar with these images. These are urchin barrens. They have replaced kelps in many parts of California and of Baja California, Mexico. And then all of the species that the communities in coastal Baja depend on, such as lobster and abalone, that grow in kelps, were also impacted. So in response to this crisis, groups of women in this community have organized, and with the support of local NGOs, have founded a movement that supports the monitoring of these coastal systems and local action aimed at the restoration of these systems through the implementation of marine protected areas, just like ours in California, but voluntary, not by law, established by the community, enforced by the community, and also restoration projects and other initiatives, diversification of activities, public education. So this is one of these groups. These are Las Sirenas de Isla Natividad, a small island in Baja California. Las Sirenas means mermaids, and so these are Elsa Cuellar, Esmeralda Albanez, Mitzi Leal, and Sulema Garcia, and these are the founders of this particular group. This is an example that I highlight because it's illustrative of a concept that I think is really important. There are agents of change, visionary leaders that have the courage and the vision and the opportunity to make change. And then from these leaders, there are movements that through coalitions, through alliances, spread and scale this impact. And this is what is happening in this particular case. Well, these groups of women, just as recently as 2 years ago, started participating for the first time ever in the assemblies that fishing cooperatives hold to make decisions about their fisheries. So here they are in the first meeting that they attended ever, and exemplifying like social change can happen relatively quickly in some circumstances. And then this is just from this past month, from a series of national conferences that brought these community women groups together to form a national alliance of women engaged in coastal stewardship and fisheries. And Las Sirenas de Isla Natividad proposed to form Las Sirenas de Mexico, the mermaids of Mexico, to spread kind of their knowledge. And then these coalitions and alliances are now blossoming all over the world. This is the African Association for Fisher Women and Producers, and these examples are really spreading all over the world. So now what can we do? How are we to engage in these big problems, these movements? Well, one, I want to go back to the beginning, is really we can engage in sustainability at all possible scales. As individuals, we make choices about energy in our homes, transportation, food. We make choices about who we vote for, who we support, the individuals and organizations that we give voice to and we provide support for. Sorry. Same for gender equality. As individuals, especially when in having the privilege of having some decision-making ability, we can be aware of biases and work to remove them, because this is pervasive in many organizations and institutions. And then we can support the leaders, men and women, that promote gender parity in their agendas. And then finally, I can't overemphasize the importance of partnerships. I like the introduction that Lisa gave. We're designed to need each other. And in fact, I would argue that very little of importance is ever achieved alone. Partnership, coalition, alliances, movements are what ultimately is going to support a better future for our planet. So thank you very much.
So the questions that we have were divided into two areas. The first ones are more on general policies, federal policies, and then some more specific about conservation in this area. So I'll start off with the general federal policies. Okay, and then you two can decide. Let's see, how far can we get with this? Not very far. Okay. Right. You two can decide how you want to answer. Can everyone see okay? Okay, so during the week of 9/11, when no flights were flying in the U.S., the average mean temperature dropped 2%, to 2 degrees. Shouldn't airline travel be addressed more in global temperature change?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to elaborate on that?
A lot of things changed during 9/11. A lot of things changed during the pandemic, and that helps us understand our own impact on the world around. Those are experiments in stopping airline traffic, but also stopping travel, stopping our impact on animal communities all over the world. So yeah, paying attention to those things and saying, yeah, these things are making a difference.
Closer to your mouth.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm sorry, and the COVID pandemic, the shutdown showed the significant impact on climate, but also on biodiversity, on wildlife, on fisheries. So that was a major experiment. I would add that as human, as society, we do lots of different things, and we have impacts in lots of ways. And there was a really interesting analysis that compared what would have the major impact in all of the dimensions of our life. And actually the conclusion was that birth control is the most significant, because you integrate impacts in so many different dimensions and over such a long period of time, so that just one child less per family would have more impact in terms of greenhouse gas emission than all other individual choices that can be made combined. So it's also very interesting, I think, and important to think holistically about what is the combination of choices that can have the greatest impact.
That's the perfect segue also to go back to looking on our website and supporting Planned Parenthood and all of the work that they're doing, which is why we're so happy that they're one of our partners. Anyhow, I digress, but, okay, never mind, I won't go down that rabbit hole now. Okay, so this is another question. My understanding is the U.S. has not signed on to the Law of the Sea Treaty. What's your perspective on the treaty and our not being signatories?
So the oceans are this common pool, open access resource, and so laws that bring responsibilities, not just rights, but also responsibilities to different nations are incredibly important. And the lack of ratification of this law is not only I don't know how to call it in a diplomatic way, but a problem in the US, but for the world. Recently, there was the ratification of the BBNJ, Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction for the high seas. So the combination of the law of the sea that grants rights and responsibility in territorial waters of nations and the BBNJ is one of the hopes that we have to get to the knowledge and the management of the ocean. So yes, I would say that that is a major issue, and now it's one of many in the United States in climate change and other parts of despite the visionary act passed by the Biden administration, there's still a ways to go.
Yes, absolutely. And the U.S. follows the law of the sea, but isn't bound by it. And I'm being more blunt. That's just cowardly.
Thank you for your honesty. Very necessary to get conversations moving. Okay, then next question regarding policy. The state of California is now evaluating whether we should increase the number of fully protected marine areas along our coast. Do you think we should add, stay, or something other, the number of protected areas?
So this, since we're being blunt, I think I will. The Marine Life Protection Act, that led to implementation of the Network of California, is one of the greatest successes. No? It's a model for the rest of the world. It's the first comprehensive marine protected network that was established anywhere. So it's a major achievement. However, at the time, climate risks and climate consideration were only marginally included in the planning. And then since the marine heat wave recently and other events have shown that we're still pretty far from the target that was posed even at the time, and even farther from the 30 by 30 target that has been endorsed by the Biden-Harris administration and others. So yes, so ultimately the goal is to support the resilience of coastal communities, to support these resources for its own value as these incredible biodiversity hotspots that we have here in California, but also for all the services that provide to people. We are far from having a network of marine protected areas that can achieve that. And I think in the spirit of adaptation, given the pace of change, there should be consideration towards an expansion and especially strengthening of regulation in the core marine protected areas here in California and elsewhere. It's difficult because it's discouraging to having gone through all of that process, and now there's more coming, but it's just, I would suggest that it's necessary to at least consider it. I don't know, because Steve was heavily involved in the MLPA and MPAs here in California, so it's actually he's the authority.
Well, I totally agree with what Fia was just saying. I totally agree. What Fia was just saying about that, and just two little things. One is that not only are they working for the kelp and the fish, but they're actually working for people who use the ocean. They're working for fishers. They're working for the whole community. And so one of the things that's happened in the last 15, 20 years where we put them in is that it's not such a give and take. It's actually where the marine protected areas are helping a lot of features of the ocean. And so we've learned that now, and we can apply that to what's coming up. We also have other things that are happening now that weren't happening at all when this went in, like wind power, offshore wind power, and figuring out how that, as a valuable resource in renewables for the future, intersects with the way we want to use the oceans isn't easy, but it requires conversation, and it requires the ability to say, yeah, we can change what we're doing when new opportunities come up and new challenges come up.
Okay. So now moving a little more locally, but still related, in what way can we support the Chamois Sanctuary?
Chumash.
The Chumash Sanctuary, people have been supporting it. There was a public comment period during, when was it, February? And part of that campaign that Violet Sage Walker led, and we helped a little bit with some videos, they raised 90,000 public comments. And to give you an idea what that means, that NOAA was just flabbergasted. They would usually get 500 public comments or 1,000, 90,000. The vast majority of them were positive. So I know some of you might have actually done a commentary like that. The other is that a lot of the initial stages of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary will be helped and monitored by our friends at the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And so some of you may know them, and just tell them how much you appreciate this new thing going in, and that you appreciate their help with it.
What are the key steps we can take to restore the kelp forests?
One critical step is just research. We know, as even in California, now in Monterey Bay, there's over 30 marine science institutions. We still don't have a full grasp of what is happening in the ocean. So research, monitoring, there's advances recently like environmental DNA, mapping help from satellite imagery, because the canopy comes to the surface of the water, you can see from space. Using all of these technologies and the power of citizen science, California, Reef California, the divers that do surveys of kelp, combining all of this to try to better understand what is happening. Some areas have been heavily impacted, have lost a lot of kelp, others are fine, others are coming back very quickly, others haven't recovered at all. We still need to understand why, what's happening. And there's a hypothesis, there's a lot of information, but still not enough. The second is protection, like we were just discussing. Marine protected areas protect the ocean from fishing, from extractive uses. Early on, there wasn't really a clear understanding of whether that protection would also provide for resilience to climate impact, because the protection doesn't necessarily keep warming out. But by keeping all of the pieces of that system and their interaction, that system is much better able to respond. It's just like basically our own health. If we are healthy, we can respond to new insults better than if we're too tired, for example. So it's the same concept that applies to ecosystem health and climate resilience. So protection is very important for marine protected areas and other measures that prevent pollution and sediment impact, etc. And then there are some active restoration methods that are being tried, from green gravel and ropes to grow kelp and put it out, to eliminating sea urchins. All that is important to address and research, but it's still very experimental, and there's questions of whether it can be scaled over spaces large enough to make a real difference when we think about the region. So those are different options, but research and conservations are key, I would say, are the priorities, and they've already shown their efficacy.
I just got back from Friday Harbor, saw a movie at the Whale Museum that emphasized the problem the whales are having due to the noise of ships that interferes with the whales' communications. The movie said that it's easy to fix if the ships would benefit all. Can these changes be legislated to save the whales? And can you speak more about this?
We work a little bit on whales, and both of those things are true. The noise of a ship will basically blanket the area where shipping is really very, very common. And what we really didn't know much before is that whales communicate with one another all the time. They live in a very rich sonic auditory environment. They're talking to one another as they're swimming, as they're migrating, and so you can imagine if you're just sort of like you were walking along and you knew where everybody within like the 100 miles was, what they were doing and how they were doing, and you were including that in what you were up to, and then all of a sudden this noise came and blanketed that all out, and you didn't know where your whale mates were along the way. So that is part of the problem that was really being addressed there. And some whales, like the ones in Puget Sound, the orcas, they're communicating, they're listening, they're finding prey by making noise, but acoustically. So yes, and then reducing that is quite possible. It is possible to legislate that. We do that with, say, shipping channels. They're legislated. We do that with shipping speeds. They're legislated. Sometimes they're slowed down to protect whales. And so that is possible. It's a matter of political will. It's a matter of economic argument, and it's a matter of, say, particularly in Puget Sound, where so much of the sound there is being driven by the ecology of the whales that it might be a local thing, not just a national one.
Thank you. Okay, last question. Can you explain the recent die-off of pelicans? Federal Marine Fisheries was recently sued by the Oceanic Earth Justice for mismanagement of the amount of catch taken by fishermen, and our animals are dying, once again affecting our bay. Who can and will stop this? There was also a big dip-off in sea lions around 2010. Can you speak to that? So basically the question is, can you explain the recent die-off of pelicans?
Did you know about the reason?
No, but I actually was very recently discussing this with a visitor at Hopkins Marine Station, and I'm not really aware of the phenomenon or what are maybe the causes. There's a hypothesis that fisheries, by removing the prey for pelicans, for sea lions, are affecting these high trophic levels, and there's been call for fisheries regulations, and in fact some has been implemented in the US and elsewhere to have a margin of safety, to manage populations of fishes not only for their own population health and sustainability, but to account for the amount of that production that needs to go up the food web. I think one of the hypotheses is that the management currently is not effective and that the pelicans don't have enough food. In the case of sea lions too, another source of mortality have been toxic algal blooms. Algal blooms that result in the production of domoic acid, the toxin that is a neurotoxin and can cause disorientation and mortality of different organisms. And in fact, sea lion die-off was in part attributed to that. So I can't say much about this particular event, but this is another case where a lot of eyes on the water. There's been a major increase in citizen science programs that include Coast Watch and MPA Watch and Reef Check of California. And perhaps what we're seeing too is a greater awareness. There's more eyes on the water and we can detect, and therefore perhaps going forward more easily associate this event to some of the causes that they may have driven. So I don't have a lot of information on this, but this is a really important question, and I think it's great that we keep such a good watch on our bay here. And anytime I talk with visitors to Hopkins Marine Station or here around Monterey, I'm really struck by the awareness about ocean systems that exist here.
On that note, the question of, do you speak to community college students about your work, and how can people get more engaged and to support the work you're doing? Can you give us a little summary on that before we wind down?
Speak loud too.
Yes, there's a number of programs and brought about that Hopkins were engaged in. There's internships for students from different institutions of the Bay. We now have about 25 interns at Hopkins that started on Monday. That includes Stanford students, but also from other institutions. Also events like open houses. We have displays on Fridays to introduce the public and students. That involves students that are also the presenters to the diversity of life in Monterey Bay. And then we have partnership with high schools and others. So there's partnerships with community colleges, with high schools, with other institutions. And there needs to be more. There needs to be more access, more programs, more investment, and it comes down to investment in education, I think, more broadly. But
especially the investment in education more broadly. We have such an amazing place to teach students from 5 years to 85 years of age. Hopkins has a group called the Friends of Hopkins that is open to everyone to join. We have about 10 public talks a year and other events, and that can not only give you some information about that, but you can bring your kids and your grandkids and meet other people that know about those. Theo has led an amazing growth in the outreach at the Hopkins Marine Station, and that's a very big part of it. Taking one step back, a lot of these issues are actually tied to climate change in the broad sense. And so when we think about sea lions and pelicans and the kelp, working with that now is really important, but also thinking about that in 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years And the health of all these systems will fray more and more as the temperature goes up and climate keeps getting worse. And so keeping an idea among our elected officials and the people that help run our societies and our civic organizations that climate change is real and it actually is affecting things now, and it's going to affect them worse in the future, not just for us, but our kids and grandkids. So it's a dual thing, working now locally, the kinds of ways we've been talking about, but also realizing we can't let things we can't let organizations, leaders, institutions ignore climate change. It has to be part of what we're all doing to make the next 50 years better.
I just want to thank everyone and say how thrilled I am to be in a room full of women and men. And just I want to pose the greatest impact is going to come from engaging, supporting, allowing the creativity, the talent, the courage of half of the human population to fully engage. That's the path to scale to address climate change and anything else. That is the one thing that I want to propose is going to make headway in addressing these challenges. It's half of the human population. Talk about path to scale. Thank you.
We're going to bring this event to a close, and thank you very, very much, Dr. Steve Palumbi, Fionenza Micheli. Thank you all for being with us today. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. We look forward to seeing you either July 12th, or more importantly, or as importantly, I said on behalf of TWMC, we look forward to seeing you at our gala on July 28th. Thank you again for being here.